Hello and welcome to Aspiebloggen podcast. I am your host, Tommy Eriksson. In today's episode, things I learned about starting a podcast. This is a podcast where I bring you my views on things in an attempt to let my voice be heard and to grow my confidence. For too long my voice has not been heard and my views are mostly unknown, but not anymore. Most of what I will bring up will be about Asperger and autism and related stuff, but other stuff will most certainly be discussed. My website is at aspiebloggen.se. There you will find the show notes for each episode as well as my other blog posts. The blog itself is in Swedish, but this podcast and the corresponding show notes will always be in English. Now let's get started. Today's episode is brought to you by the letter L. Wow, 1 week has passed since the first episode and not one day has gone by without me thinking about what I haven't gotten myself into. Anyways, it feels good but still strange to finally be up and running. So much work had to be done, but now all I have to do is to maintain it and that will be much easier. But I'm not that fond of how the first episode turned out, and while I didn't really know how to fix it, here are some things that I learned while making it and later. Talking point number 1, take your time to prepare. I wanted the episode to air last Saturday since it would have been my father's birthday. Had he been alive, he would have been 64 years old. Well, I started late and finished editing after midnight, hence why it appears to be from Sunday. But I still consider Saturday the 17th to be the official launch day of the podcast. Might as well make that clear now for the sake of anniversaries. Number 2. Prepare your talking points. Last time I did have a scripted beginning that has been slightly altered for this and future episodes, but then I went unscripted for the rest. I'm not saying that unscripted is bad, but I should have written down something more. This episode is entirely scripted, but that might change for future episodes. Now I know I forgot stuff, but I can't for a moment remember what. If I remember after beginning recording, I'll put it in the show notes. Well, one thing came to me, so that will be next point. Number 3, swearing. This podcast will not have swearing in it. The first version I posted claimed it would have, but after listening to episode 138 of the Audacity to podcast, I realized that swearing might not be such a good idea, and it certainly isn't necessary for this podcast. I listen to a lot of YouTube videos that have swearing in them, so I'm not that sensitive to it, and therefore didn't mind including it. But having learned now at least one view on swearing and noticed that so far on 2 episodes I have only cursed twice, and that was all in the first episode, I now feel like keeping swearing out of this podcast won't be difficult, and therefore I will strive to do it. It will probably turn out for the best in the long run anyway. Should I see a need for profanities? For instance, if some guest will be on the show that has a style of talking that does include a lot of profanity, then I will mark that particular episode as explicit in some way. But otherwise, this podcast will be clean. This does mean that this episode has a new section to it. Thankfully, if that is the right word, I don't think anyone has downloaded any episode, so I re-recorded the part about swearing for this episode and will update the show notes that will also include the original show notes. I also never deleted the work files for Audacity, so I didn't have to recompress the audio. I could just make a new file. But I did have to do that for the first episode. Due to the file size, I don't keep the work files. That's the file is called something.aup and the corresponding folder. So for episode 1 I had to edit the MP3 and then re-upload it. That might mean that the quality is lower, but hopefully it won't be too obvious. Point 4. Don't underestimate the time needed for editing, but don't over-edit. In my first episode I remember pausing a lot when talking. I don't know how annoying or not this might be, so for that episode I edited out a lot of pauses. This took forever and made me hate editing. For this episode I will leave them in until either I get feedback about them or learn what others think. Editing is good, but don't edit stuff that might not be that bad. Point 5. Speaking English is harder than it seems. I thought about this again when I saw the documentary Movement 2, The Art of Algorithm. I won't go into the movie itself now, but one thing I noticed every time I see it is how the narrator has trouble saying certain words since he is from Hungary. One such word is visuals. I did a test recording and that word is easier to say in a sentence, but I still struggled with it as well. Let's just say that I won't be giving people comments on their pronunciation, since I am not that good at it either. Let's just say that I will have to continue working on lighting my voice. And that will have to conclude episode 2. Maybe I will be able to keep this a weekly show after all. If so, that would be great. You can leave comments as well as find the script in the show notes at aspiebloggen.se/2. That's Aspiebloggen, spelled just as the podcast, /2. And if I think about anything while editing, I will include it. See you next week.